Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Hope you are enjoying lunch. In case there is someone who may be yet uncertain, today is day 7, IPDET 2015. We have a rather unique guest speaker with us today. In fact, it's a real honor to have Dr. Sully Gariba from Ghana here with us to speak to us this noon. Sully is a man of many skills and many hats. He is currently the High Commissioner of Ghana to Canada. Prior to that, he was the Senior Policy Advisor to the President of Ghana and was head of the President's Policy Delivery Unit. He is an extensive set of experiences and years spent on international development, and indeed he has a doctor's degree from here at Carleton University. So when he was given the possibility of coming to Canada as the High Commissioner, he took that job knowing full well what the winters are like here. So it speaks both to his strength and his perseverance that he would choose to come to Canada year-round. In fact, he told us he took the job, he got here in January. Now you can imagine January is probably not a very receptive month to moving your wife and your child and yourself from Ghana to Ottawa. But he did it, and he's a trusted advisor of the President, and the President personally asked him to take this position for a couple of years perhaps. So it's a great honor to welcome home this Carleton graduate, and may I also say to welcome home an IPDET lecturer. Sully has been with us for many years as one of our key lecturers, and it was always great to have him. So now he's back in a slightly different position. He is the High Commissioner of the nation of Ghana for the nation of Canada. May I ask you please to all join with me in a warm IPDET welcome of Sully Gariba.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Uncle Ray. You know, in Africa, when you are invited to an occasion like this, and I guess in Canada as well, they ask you to send in your bio. Julia phoned my office several times for this bio, and I said, please don't send her a bio. I want to hear what Uncle Ray will say about me. And so I'm deeply honored that Uncle Ray remembers the path that we have walked in this challenging journey of evaluation. I can't start this conversation without also recognizing another icon in the evaluation movement, Aunt Linda. So when in IPDET you have Uncle Ray and Aunt Linda, you know that you have the complete picture. One of the first things I asked Aunt Linda was whether Ray has grown any shorter than I knew him to be tall. And she said, oh, he's still the same height, and I'm still the same height too. And so much as many things remain the same, a lot more has changed. When I was asked to give this talk, my second lunch talk in the IPDET history, I began to wonder, what would I say that's different from what people from all over the world have been listening to the last 7 days of IPDET? or for that matter, longer, because you're all pursuing careers in evaluation. Then my 16-year-old daughter said, well, you know, maybe you should just tell them stories, because you've told me many stories, some of them true, many of them false. So I thought that I would use the opportunity of my daughter's advice. You've just had a very nourishing meal for the body. You have been subjected to 7 days of very dense intellectual discourses about theories of evaluation, evaluation practice, eloquently delivered by Uncle Ray and Aunt Linda. And so I wondered, you know, what more can I add to that density of thought and reflection about evaluation? So I chose to focus my conversation on giving you a dessert around the African story. The story partly of my own journey as an evaluator, as an African evaluator, but also a story that will have implications on what this year represents as the year designated as a year of evaluation by EvalNet and other professional associations. That story for me begins with my great-grandfather, who I believe was, and for his cohorts, the original evaluators of Africa. For many of you whose first language is not English, and whose native language is far away from English, you'll be hard to find the meaning of evaluation or the word in your language which reflects evaluation. Well, in my traditional culture, evaluation relates to investigation. It relates to finding out your past, but also finding out how your past shapes and influences your present, and even more so, how your circumstances of life might foretell what you're likely to be in life. So evaluation is almost equivalent to divination. And the vectors of knowledge in our society, who we can approximate to be close to evaluators, are what we would call the soothsayers. For many from the African culture, but also from other cultures, there are these old men and women who know about the cosmology of your society, who can triangulate historical evidence with contemporary evidence. And before you start any journey, any project in the village, you have to consult with these soothsayers. When you're going to get married, the first thing your parents do, the minute you inform them, is to go and see the soothsayer and ask about the new bride. And the soothsayer throws a few coins and trinkets around and is able to reflect upon where the roots of this individual come from. And furthermore, looks at existential realities of the family that you're marrying into. And are literally able to say, this marriage is going to have many children. It is going to last a very long time. And it's going to be successful. You will celebrate many harvests. Therefore, that's a good choice. And then you pack up and you go home and you are renewed in your capacity to follow through with this marriage. Same thing happens with farming, what crop you should grow, when you should start. And this individual is not doing that out of magic or voodoo. They're doing that out of the systematic collection of historical evidence, of existential realities, and are able to foretell. They are able to predict. In that process, they are using ontology. They are weighting their existential realities, the notion of being. And the epistemology that they use has to do with the tools of valuation. They rely on the culture. They rely on history. They rely on ancestral lineages. They formulate rules of the game, and right there in front of you, they are triangulating all of this evidence to be able to provide you recommendations for action. My grandfather was a soothsayer. My great-grandfather was a soothsayer. Therefore, I consider that he was one of the foremost evaluators in my village. And that's where I consider to be the roots of my evaluative expertise. And I challenge any society, traditional society in this room, where such vectors of knowledge do not exist. They exist even today. For the Ghanaians who are here, I made a very interesting comment once on our television during election. I used to run commentaries on elections. And I said to them that actually the politicians of my area go to this one village, and you could see election time, many vehicles are parked there. And usually, the first person to go in would have his set of recommendations and come out, and immediately following him would be an opposition candidate for the same riding, also going for advice. Why would they flock to that village and to many other villages if they did not have core beliefs in the value of traditional evaluators? So evaluation, ladies and gentlemen, is a noble profession that you are studying and that you're contributing to. And Uncle Ray and Aunt Linda are among the vectors of knowledge of evaluation that seek to transmit. But the traditional vectors of knowledge, the traditional evaluators, my great-grandfather and many of that tradition that exists, are not autocratic. They do not simply give you a lecture. They involve you intimately in the gathering of evidence, of information around which they triangulate. They ask you, right now, how many wives do you have? You want to marry another one, so they have to know how many you already have. Has there been any deaths in the family? They ask so many questions which may seem unrelated, but they're carrying out a very participatory focus group conversation with you as a credible source of information in order that they can establish the right evidence to give you the recommendations. And so in that context, the very tools we use are tools of evidence gathering which allow us to make informed judgment. Evaluation is about learning and accountability. I'm just going to focus for the next few minutes that I have on the learning part of it, and to christen my conversation around what have we learned? What have we learned in this year of evaluation that we're making pivotal evidence about it? Or what have we lost in our learning journey? These are very interesting questions for me as I reflect on my own professional growth in evaluation. I believe about 15 years ago, or probably earlier, is when Ray and a whole range of people globally. By the way, I met Ray for the first time 30 years ago, so that tells you how many years we've known each other. And back in those early days, there was a conversation about fabricating a new paradigm for reflecting on global developmental realities, and for that matter, challenging the orthodoxy of traditional evaluation, which at the time, less so now than before now, was still quite asymmetrical. For those of us in the developing world, we just had the theories and the methods given to us by the knowledgeable North, who had many textbooks and we just had to learn them. The bulk of evaluation that we did in Africa, in the developing world, were evaluations that were requested by those to whom our governments were accountable, the donors. It was they who financed projects. It was they who determined the theories of change of the projects. It was they who, with their intellectual capacity, defined the theories that had to be used and the methods of evaluation. They even created evaluation standards and yards of measurement. And for us in the developing world, we just had to use those tools to measure the extent to which these projects delivered the outputs they were supposed to deliver, how the outputs resulted in outcomes, and what chance the outcomes had for making lasting impact on people's lives. And if we had any role in evaluation, in the evaluation process, we did so as research assistants to collect information in the field. And so in 1984, when I went out on one of those evaluation missions, it was on water supply and its impact on sanitation. The tools that I was given to implement as a local enumerator, to fill in, to ask the questions, and to record the answers. And the answers were multiple choice. One of the most interesting questions had to do with understanding the pattern of sanitation in traditional society. And I can tell you this before, after you've eaten, not before. One of the questions I had to ask women in the village was, where do you defecate? Now, if you have to translate this question into my native language, you can imagine what it would translate into. And so this old woman, who was as old as my grandmother, looked at me carefully and said, I would only say this to you once. You want to embarrass me in front of this white man by asking where your grandmother goes to defecate. Of course, it's in the bush. And so, almost after every question, Alan will ask me, what was the answer? And when he asked me what was the answer, I said, oh, the woman said, the white man with you is a very wise man. And of course, he was very happy that she acknowledged his wisdom. But by the end of applying that questionnaire, I said, there's definitely got to be a change in our understanding of evaluation, in the theories that are behind evaluation, and for that matter, in the tools that we use to record information and evidence from citizens, to capture their reality, and to be able to analyze whether or not interventions that we have are making any impact. And so I get back to the notion of knowledge. What have we learned? Clearly, we have learned an awful lot of new knowledge and information, techniques and skills and capacities. IPDET is 15 years old. It has produced thousands of people who come from various professional walks of life, who themselves have been accomplished in what they do in their home countries. And in this conglomeration of individual minds, we have come with quite a wide area network of evaluators globally. Every day when I open my email, I see dozens of discourses going on, mostly from the IPDET network. So clearly, we have learned a lot, but at the same time, in this period and to date, I download many, many articles, sometimes books, even as I was preparing for this, a couple of days ago, I started downloading stuff to prepare myself. And then I said, wait a minute. For those of us who advocate for an alternative form of knowledge, for a much deep-seated, reflective knowledge that comes from people's realities, what have we uploaded? How much knowledge have we uploaded to the global, to the universal knowledge about evaluation? I dare to say some people have, but very few of us have. In 2007, we met in a much bigger conference of 600 delegates from across the world to talk about making evaluation our own in Africa. We had Michael Quinn-Patton, who shared the platform with me as co-keynote speakers, and he reflected deep-seated realities about his work in the Maori community and the extent to which traditional beliefs, traditional knowledge systems have crystallized into quite substantive bodies of knowledge around which communities and institutions are increasingly uploading traditional knowledge to ferment the development of evaluation in New Zealand and in other places. In Africa, not much of that is happening. So we launched the Made in Africa initiative, which my colleague Serge, was one of the latter generation of African Evaluation Association presidents, have all tried to institutionalize. What have we learned? We have learned the capacity also, as people from the developing world, to organize ourselves into substantive evaluation associations that they now call voluntary organizations in evaluation. And to date, out of the 52 African countries, I think there's about 30 African evaluation associations or country evaluation associations in these areas. And these are associations that are citizen-based groupings that reflect upon the theories and practice of evaluation and engage in evaluation activities which are populating the world of evaluation. What have we learned? We have learned that there are distinctive methodologies for exercising evaluation and that are quite a diverse group of such methodologies, and that we cannot simply focus on a unidimensional set of theories, approaches, and methodologies that are deeply seated in Western intellectual thinking and practice, that we now are in a position, such as with IPDET, to display the vast array of methodologies, especially as you will witness for those of you who are staying for the workshops. I was part of the workshops for 10 years and focusing on citizen tools and methods and reflecting upon how these might contribute to a new theory of evaluation. Because we must make a distinction between evaluation done unto us or evaluations that we own ourselves. The moment of truth is not the truth that is told by an independent agent using tools and indicators that are oblivious to my reality. In Africa, we tell truth to throne. During celebrations and festivals, the dance that the women carry out, if you watch their steps and the songs, the vast density of these might contain some realities, some truths that the village chief is being told. If he is an adulterer, they will say that to his face in song and dance. If he's a wicked chief, they will say that to his face. If he's a benevolent chief, they would say that to his face. These are substantive approaches to evaluation that for us who get the opportunity to participate in IPDET should also upload as forms of knowledge that are credible, that actually advance people's reality much further. In conclusion, we've gone through 15 years of IPDET, during which time IDEAS was born, and that was the conclusion of my story in my relationship with Ray, because once we dreamed about creating alternative platforms for challenging the then existing orthodox paradigm and broadening up the scope of evaluation, we ended up in Beijing, I believe, in 2005, setting up the International Development Evaluation Association, IDEAS, of which I was, I think, accidentally elected the founding president. I was accidentally elected because there was a sharp contest between a very profound individual from China, from Japan, who was almost certain to become the president. But this conference was taking place in Beijing. And unknowing to me, there was clearly a contestation going on in the background between the Chinese and intending to not endorse a Japanese candidate. So here I was a candidate with very little chance of winning, and then all of a sudden I won. But what was it was that before I left for this conference, I went to my village. And I was told I would be a great man in a faraway land, a land with many, many people. And so it was that the traditional evaluator was dead on. I thank you very much, and I hope you have a fruitful celebration.
Thanks for coming. Thanks, Linda.
Sully,
Absolutely.
So Sully has agreed to take some questions. If any of you would like to address him, I think you can call him Sully.
Absolutely.
He's a very kind, open man. Or if you feel so inclined, a high commissioner.
No, His Excellency.
Oh, His Excellency.
Yeah, aha, that's right.
His Excellency, the High Commissioner.
Aha, correct.
For the nation of Ghana. Anyone want to address an issue to Sully?
Just I'm wondering, is still your village evaluator alive, and how much?
Excuse me, would you stand?
Oh, for sure.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I am Asad Abdullah from Sudan, UNDP. Wondering if still your village evaluator is still alive, and how much he take for his services.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, His Excellency, for the speech and then. Thank you. My name is Gertrude Basima from Uganda, and I thank you, His Excellency, for the speech and the note. I would want to ask from your past experience of work, the delivery unit you have in your country, when it started, what are its functions, and how is it operating? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohamed Lamin Jaite from the Gambia. Your Excellency, I want to thank you for the eloquent speech. You have delved into the importance of traditional knowledge in evaluation. And most of this traditional knowledge, from our understanding, are not written. Some of them are in folktales, some of them are in, verbal, oral. So how do you think we should go around it to make them feature into the evaluation literature? Thank you.
Okay. That was three. So
yeah, okay. So let me address the three questions. The first one is about my grandfather and whether or not he's alive and what impact. The point I've been making is that in every village around most traditional societies, these grandfathers and grandmothers are alive, and they're making incredible impact. As I said, almost no social project is started in those communities without their participation, which even tells us that our traditional societies even conduct ex-ante evaluation. In fact, ex-ante evaluation is more important in traditional society than ex-post evaluation. So if you listen carefully and you watch carefully, there is an antecedent in our communities. So to that respect, my grandfather is alive in every village, in every community, and percolating in every formal communities, including urban communities. What we need to watch, and this is important, is that we're not just revering traditional knowledge. The onus is on us as people who are aspiring evaluators to deepen this knowledge, to reflect harder on it. Every society has positives and has negatives, and to eschew the negatives and focus on the positives. Which takes me to the third question around oral tradition that prevails in our communities. The traditional vectors of knowledge are people of their time and their space. We are the children of those vectors of knowledge, or we aspire to be their children. We want to carry that tradition forward. How can we carry that tradition forward in a situation of modernity, in towns and villages, with parliaments and other settings? We are the ones who must now be bilingual, sometimes even tricultural. When I relate with Ray and Linda, I don't blame them for not understanding the context that I come from, because to perpetually blame them is an abdication of the truth. I must develop the tools of my context and share with them. They will see wisdom in it. Evaluation has a universality. If you begin to understand that theories of change are theories of change no matter where you go, but the content of the theory of change is what we must now upload to say that there is a different reality about theories of change in my context. For example, the evaluators of MDGs today will tell you that extreme poverty has reduced drastically, mainstream poverty has reduced considerably, but the primary indicator of poverty is people who live on less than $2 a day. It used to be $1 a day. Now, I don't know whether it's $1.50 or $2 a day. But that is the primary denominator. When you go to most informal settings and you talk to most poor people, their rendition of who is poor is different. It's people who have no one to care for them. Marginalized people, people with disability, orphans, albinos in some circumstances. Even though some of them may have more than $2 a day to live on, but they're still considered poor. And therefore, our yardstick of measurement, depending on what context, what ontology, what epistemology we use, and also depending on who is doing the counting. Is this simply an outsider oblivious of the local context, or a partnership between an outsider with an independent view and an insider? The challenge is to us, is to you as you attend IPDET. What value have I added to IPDET? Have I reflected on anything in my context to challenge the lecturer, or when you get to the workshops, to input into the workshop? Because the workshops are not about lectures, they're about co-constructing knowledge. Or are we continuously going to absorb and absorb? IPDET has no exams. Therefore, you're not going to be marked, but you're going to be judged by how much you participated in the process, how much value you added, as much as how much value you extracted. To the middle question, which is on the delivery unit. When I was first invited to join President Mahama, he said to me, look, I know you're an evaluator, but I've asked you to join this government to do something different, to use your evaluation knowledge to make sure I succeed. Because I know you evaluators. I don't want you to come and write my obituary. I don't want you to come and 4 years later tell me why I failed. I want you to come and help me succeed, but I want you to use your knowledge in evaluation. So the delivery unit is about turning evaluation upside down and saying, what are the conditions for success in order to establish what government priorities are and to track the delivery of those priorities using similar indicators, but making sure that at each step of the way, when you find there's likely a derailment, every week there's something on the president's desk that he's able to make a call and say to the Ministry of Energy, hey, we made this promise, it's 3 months on, nothing has happened. So it's retrofitting the tools of evaluation, turning them upside down to ensure that delivery occurs. That process is still going on. Recently, the president appointed my replacement, and I had to go back and then help orient the entire presidential team to the notion of delivery. Delivery units are operating in Rwanda, in Senegal, I believe, and a number of other, Liberia just initiated the establishment of a delivery unit. So delivery units are important, but they do not replace evaluation. And I resisted every attempt to put an evaluation unit in the office of the president. Because, I tell you, for the South Africans here, there's a very strong monitoring and evaluation unit in the office of the president of South Africa. One of the first in Africa. Incredible, very strong and very powerful. Except, that they continue to face a dilemma. Last year when I was in South Africa, they were releasing their first set of evaluations. And one particular evaluation was provocative, which basically said education is failing. The evidence was clear. They had collected data, they had done all the things. And this report was being released in an election year. And the 5-year period they were measuring were almost coterminous with President Zuma's first term. Now, true to our profession, we cannot lie. We must tell the truth. Imagine telling the truth from the citadel of power, basically saying your boss has failed. So I said, please, take an evaluation unit to a more independent institution. Because if it's in the office of the president, I would either be forced to lie, or if I tell the truth, my government will get defeated. Any other questions? So you see the dilemma of putting evaluation in the highest level of government.
What happened?
What happened in South Africa?
In that report.
In that report, I think it was released. Maybe some of the people from South Africa. It was released, but it wasn't given publicity. You know, evaluators, evaluators can do their work well, but governments can decide who sees the report.
Okay, thank you so much, His Excellency. I would have thought you would have been more happy if I called you former president of IDEAS and Afraya, but I'll call you His Excellency, the High Commissioner. My question is with regard to, I'm Warponge from Kenya. Yes, and a board member of IDEAS. Okay. Yes. So my question is with regard to your ancestors, whom you've recognized as initial evaluators, yes, and not only our ancestors, but the soothsayers whom people go to, yes, and the soothsayers are transitioning at an alarming rate, right? And slowly by slowly, if these soothsayers do not try to pass this knowledge to the younger generation, then it means that in a few years from now, we will have no soothsayers to go to. Now, as having passed through this path yourself, what do you think can be done to make sure that the transition of the now modern evaluators is such that we continue to mentor the emerging and young evaluators. Thank you.
I assume this is the last question, so if there's any other, okay. I used soothsayers, trust me, only as vignettes of the reality, for their symbolism. They operate in their time and space, or they operated and continue to operate in their time and space. They serve the communities that consider them to be credible. But I use them as a symbolism to say that every one of us is indeed a soothsayer. But are we the kind of soothsayer that will simply download knowledge and systems and theories and tools and just go and apply them? Or are we the kind of soothsayers, the new generation of soothsayers, that will own that knowledge, that will embed that knowledge in the complex cultures and contexts that we come from, and intellectualize the tools for carrying them out? Or are we simply copycats who would take results-based management and apply them? Complete, no variation. Who would take experimental or quasi-experimental models and look at using them as a means of measuring impact, open and shut? Or are we the kind of soothsayers that would challenge this knowledge, credible as it may be in intellectual context, vary them and justify the variations in a manner that makes good to these ancestors that we have? We may not even know the actual tools they use. It is not important. They did what they did or do what they do in the social and economic context that they operate. In fact, if you try to go deeper into it, you will find that many of the things were even illogical. So I use that just for symbolism. But what I do for myself is take every new tool and every new knowledge and subject it to an interrogation about whether or not it is consistent with my sense of reality and the worldview. I invite more information and evidence from people who are touched directly by poverty. And so I cannot proceed with any evaluation exercise without making it participatory, without co-constructing knowledge, working in the slums of Kibera, working with slum dwellers. How can you construct indicators for change for them without listening to them? How can you do a sample survey in the slums of Kibera? You have to do a total enumeration, so the organizations working there must subject themselves to complete and total enumeration of all dwellers, 2,000, 3,000 of them, in order to construct with them the indicators for change, in order to construct with them the type of housing they may stay in order to construct with them the kinds of issues that they want to advocate on. So I make myself a different kind of evaluator, but not the less different from the global realities about evaluation. I translate the tools and methods and theories that are globally accepted, but I translate them with an African language, with an African vision. And in so doing, I inherit my grandfather's profession without necessarily seeking to carry that bag, the one that has all the stones and the metals. I don't carry those anymore, but I carry a different set of tools, some of them born out of IPDET, some of them born out of classes and other areas of thought and transition. So that's what I mean by the symbolism of the African soothsayer for the future generation of evaluators. I wish you well. Oh,
We have had an amazing experience with Sully Gariba. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have two small, we think nice, but modestly inexpensive gifts for you. The first one is a battery for your cell phone or your laptop. This will keep you powered up, Sully.
Thank you.
And the second one we have for you, this can go into your collection of IPDET bookends. Book stops.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, God, great to have you.
Wonderful to have you too. Yeah. Thank you.
You know, this man is very wise. I mean, this is not a shallow, superficial conversation today. This is really something quite good. And I have to say, I think he is a soothsayer. I think he has wisdom, he has insight, and he has understanding of what has to happen for the evaluation community to reach out, to be credible, and to build new knowledge in ways that we are not doing such a good job of right now. I'm pushing this one step a little bit further. This morning in class, we had several questions and a pretty good conversation about triangulation. And what does this man talk about this at lunchtime? He knew we were talking about triangulation. There it is again. There it is again. Sully, ladies and gentlemen, please, a warm IPDET acknowledgement of Sully. He may be the only ambassador in the world who can stand up and have this kind of conversation and make it coherent, make it forceful, and absolutely ring authentic. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Sully.
Thank you.
All right.